Hello, my name is Ernie Keane and we are UATV English. We're here to give you things seen from Ukrainian perspective, that is, war. Watch in the episode. Tables turned for Russia, harsh change of hearts in Washington. Russia will be forced to reparations, at least $500 billion. Russian secret operations revealed, watch our investigative report. Well, sit back, relax, if possible, get comfortable and leave the rest to us. Welcome to Wrap Up Weekly. First things first, let's look closer into, without any exaggeration, dramatic recent change of hearts of the current US administration towards Ukraine, which Ukraine and its Western partners, by the way, have been waiting for so long, after many doomed and clumsy attempts to negotiate a truce with dictator Putin and even friendly reverences done towards the ICC-indicted criminal Putin, like suspending military aid and intel to Ukraine, or ambiguous, to say the least, head-turning statements such as Putin wants peace. Finally, Trump's patience seems to have snapped. Obviously, all the worst records-breaking massive terror unleashed by the Kremlin at Ukraine simultaneously assuring Trump of its keen desire for peace have clearly shown the obvious again. A civilized dialogue with Russia, that dictator Putin, is impossible, as simple as that. Many have tried, all have failed. Don't trust me, ask Neville Chamberlain. So, power. That is the only language all dictators, not only Putin, are speaking. That translates directly into more and more timely military support for Ukraine and, consequently, military defeat of Russian criminal aggressive force. Only that will bring Moscow to its senses and meaningful negotiations.
We're not happy with Putin. I'm not happy with Putin. I can tell you that much right now, because he's killing a lot of people. And a lot of them are his soldiers. His soldiers and their soldiers, mostly. And it's now up to 7,000 a week. And I'm not happy with Putin. We get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by Putin, for you want to know the truth. He's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless.
Right. Who could ever thought? Well, at least this time, Mr. Trump immediately shows his displeasure. And it's real, not demonstrative. For the first time since in the office, trumpets are now actively developing new sanctions against Russia for real. And not only trumpets, by the way, we are talking bipartisan here. A joint project of senators from both Republican and Democratic sides, which kinda was there all the time, somewhere in the thin air, but never materialized into anything concrete due to the lack, or better said, complete absence of support from the White House. It was a holy day for Comrade Putin. Now, tables turned. Mr. Trump has finally started talking about supplying Ukraine with new modern air defense systems and weapons. This is big and crucial, as big as crucial as it gets. Yes, America will do this for money, but hey, even so, it never happened before, with this administration at least.
We send weapons to NATO, and NATO pays for these weapons in full. Thus, the weapons we send are sent to NATO, and then NATO supplies these weapons to Ukraine, and the alliance pays for these weapons. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States.
Well, I guess we all can consider it a hell of an irony if these money to pay for American weapons used in the war against Russia will be actually coming from the proceeds of those frozen Russian assets in the Western banks. You only imagine Putin's face sitting in the bunker under counter-offensive Ukrainian fire and be like, boom, I just paid for that. And the scenario is very possible as the talks between Secretary of State Marco Rubio and very Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on the sidelines of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations summit in Kuala Lumpur came as a cold shower for the Russians. What's supposed to become a sweetener for Russia's relations with the US turned out to be not that at all. After the meeting, Marco Rubio openly condemned the war with Kremlin is waging now all out of the blue. Russians were lectured that killing civilians in Ukraine and even killing their own troops is a bad thing to do.
Obviously, the loss of life is something of great interest to the president. It's important to note that since January of this year, as an example, just to give you on the Russian side, they've lost 100,000 soldiers, dead. Not injured, I'm talking about dead. And on the Ukrainian side, the numbers are less, but still very significant. And so that's, the president doesn't like wars. He thinks wars are a waste of money and a waste of lives, and he wants them to end. And he's going to do everything he can within his power to end this war and any other war he has a chance to end, as you've seen in the past. And so we're going to continue to work at it. We understand that these things take time and patience.
Good to know, but what did that? I mean, what changed hearts indeed in Washington? What could have influenced the White House's attitude towards Russia that harshly and that irrevocably? The incessant shelling of Ukrainian cities, probably. Indeed, despite the constant blah, blah, blah by the last Russian emperor about how much he's ready for peace, in reality it turned out to be assault drones, cruise and ballistic missiles raining at Ukrainian cities and communities all over the country every single night during all week, destroying homes, claiming civilians and children's lives. Kyiv, Lutsk, Konstantinovka, Mykolaiv. In Kharkiv, a UAV blasted into a maternity hospital. Another big terror raid was carried out on the night of Thursday this week at Kyiv. Wounded, dead, burning city. I know as I live here in Kyiv, I've lived that through, watching it with my own eyes, while Russian kamikaze drone blasted into my house. I'm saying that because I want you in the West all to know Russian terror does not stop when you stop watching videos about it. It does not stop when you close your notebooks and keep on swiping your social networks feed further. Every night while you turn your gadgets into silent mode, it gets loud in Ukraine. While you sleep in your beds, we hide in shelters as Russians launch 400, 500, 600 drones, bombs and missiles at Ukrainian cities every night. The peak of Russian terror, quite damn literally, fell on this Wednesday. 741 airborne means of death and destruction fired at Ukraine. I guess all that, while talking about peace, could really piss Mr. Trump off.
A moment after I had run away, I heard a roar and a cracking sound, the sound of glass shattering. I turned around and saw that my apartment was gone. The fire started instantly.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Remember, I just did call the shift in American administration's rhetoric irrevocable. I did that for a reason. Representatives of the United States of America joined the meeting of the Coalition of the Willing for the first time. Previously, the Americans were not even invited often to the meetings of the coalition for obvious lack of their willingness to join. This time, they were invited and accepted the invitation on a high-profile level. The special representative of the US President, Keith Kellogg, Senators Graham and Blumenthal were there. And the coalition meeting this week adopted a number of decisions crucial for Ukraine and Europe. In the case of any ceasefire agreement with Russia signed, the UK and France will patrol Ukraine's air and sea space to make sure the agreement is being viable. According to the Telegraph, the countries will also help train Ukrainian troops as part of the creation of the new multinational force. The Coalition of the Willing will also have its new permanent headquarters in Paris and, in the future, plans to open a coordination center in Kyiv. The goal of creating a multinational force is to be ready for deployment immediately after the cessation of hostilities in Ukraine to deter very, very possible future Russian aggression.
It's now obvious to all partners that Russia is blocking all peace efforts, and it was Putin who rejected the ceasefire proposal, including one brought by the United States. Second, we see that Russia is not only pushing on with attacks at the front and trying to expand the war, but also still putting huge resources into weapons production. Putin is planning to keep fighting, and he's not looking for a way out of this war. Third, our joint pressure has created real strategic problems for Russia. Sanctions are working.
Well, this time, the Coalition of the Willing gathered on the sidelines of the conference on the reconstruction of Ukraine in Rome. And there was indeed a lot of good news for Ukraine. Well, finally, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said that his country was ready to purchase Patriot air defense systems from the United States and transfer them to Ukraine. At the same time, the Chancellor acknowledged that the American side, their military, of course, needs these systems just as well. But according to Merz, I quote, they have a lot of them. The Chancellor also said that Russia is obliged to reparations and will be forced to compensate Ukraine for the losses caused during full-scale terror of theirs in the amount of at least 500 billion euros.
We estimate the property damage to be around 500 billion euros. Russia must pay for this damage. Until this has happened, Russia must not and will not have access to the frozen Russian assets. I would also like to say that the freeze will remain in place.
Well, of course, this time also it's about the money, but this time for rebuilding and renovation purposes. In Rome, the partners pledged more than 10 billion euros for the restoration of Ukraine. The European Commission will allocate 2.3 billion, of which 1.8 are loan guarantees. A new investment fund for reconstruction has been created. In addition, a number of countries are also allocating funds separately. For example, the Netherlands is allocating €1/3 billion. All this money will primarily go to investment projects as well as to the restoration of energy and water supply after the Russian terror attacks. However, President Zelensky reminded that all the effort will be just in vain without enough pressure applied onto the perpetrator of the crime.
And this is what we must focus on first. We must stop Russian drones and missiles. And this means more air defense supplies and more investments in interceptor drones, air defense systems, and of course missiles. And I urge all our partners, increase your investments. When Russia increases its attacks, we cannot have a shortage of funding for drone production. More than 30 countries and hundreds of companies are represented at the conference today. And we must reach a point where Ukraine's air defense and drone sector is supported by over 30 countries and backed by hundreds of companies, not only from Ukraine, but also from Europe, the United States, and beyond.
Ukraine is preparing new agreements with partners that will make the country stronger, both in defense and recovery areas, said President Zelensky. For successful defense against Russian terror, Kyiv and partners will need joint production and investment because, obviously, Russia has significantly larger industrial capabilities than Ukraine has. So what Kyiv is intended to do in this regard in the first place? Enough said, let us show you.
Every day, the aggressor state's army shells peaceful Ukrainian cities. Over the past week, Russia has launched 1,270 drones, 39 missiles, and nearly 1,000 cab bombs at Ukraine. On the night of July 7th, Russian strikes hit Zaporizhzhia, as well as the Kyiv, Sumy, Donetsk, Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkiv, and Odessa regions. President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Ukraine needs its partners' help to bolster air defense.
We very much hope that our partners will fulfill everything we agreed upon. Air defense is the key to protecting lives. We are also dynamically implementing agreements on investments in our domestic weapons production, especially all types of drones. Particular attention is being paid to interceptor drones. We are contracting as much as possible. Thank you to all our partners who are helping. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, on Telegram.
Danish Foreign Minister Lars Rasmussen called for increased investment in Ukraine's defense sector. He suggested that frozen Russian assets should be used for this purpose. Denmark plans to raise this issue during its EU presidency.
The most obvious starting point is to increase investment in Ukraine. They could probably produce twice as much military equipment as they do now if they had the funds. Lars Rasmussen, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Denmark, in comments to Danish outlet DR.
At the end of June, President Zelensky announced that Denmark would be the first country with which Kyiv will launch joint defense production outside Ukraine. This includes manufacturing drones and long-range systems. Zelensky emphasized that this move is a response to growing Russian missile threats and a key to strengthening air defense. According to the Danish defense minister, production may begin as early as fall 2025. Ukraine has also reached agreements on joint drone production with several U.S. companies, according to the Ukrainian president. This involves hundreds of thousands of units, including interceptor drones. President Zelensky discussed joint weapons manufacturing opportunities with the U.S. president and emphasized that Kyiv is ready for direct projects with Washington. Donald Trump told reporters that he had a good conversation with Zelensky and confirmed they discussed the possibility of sending missiles for the Patriot air defense system to Kyiv.
Yeah, I'd like to see it happen. I don't want to see 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 soldiers killed every week. And you have other people, but for the most part, so far it's been mostly soldiers. And they're Ukrainian soldiers and they're also Russian soldiers. But it's 5,000 souls, and they're being killed every single week. So it's really higher than that now.
Germany's Defense Minister Boris Pistorius plans to discuss military aid for Ukraine during his upcoming visit to Washington, according to German media citing government spokesperson Stefan Cornelius. He confirmed that Berlin intends to purchase 2 Patriot missile systems from the U.S. for Ukraine. Germany has sent a request to U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and is awaiting Washington's commitment to transferring the systems to Berlin.
The possible purchase and transfer will likely be discussed on July 9th, when Friedrich Merz meets with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. The following day, the Chancellor will attend the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Rome, where Zelensky is also expected to be a guest. On the sidelines, he could discuss the potential deal with Merz, and above all, further support for Ukraine. From a publication by Wirtschaftswoche.
The German government has confirmed it will continue supporting Ukraine's air defense initiative. Around $1 billion has already been raised through this program. In addition, Germany is interested in establishing joint defense enterprises with Ukraine and continues to invest in Ukrainian weapons manufacturing to maximize the country's production capacity. Reported by Kristina Dombrovska, UATV News.
Rotterdam, Europe's largest port, located, in case you didn't know that, in the Netherlands, is preparing for a potential war with Russia, including reserving space for ships carrying military cargo and planning where to redirect them in the event of hostilities, the Financial Times report. The port of Rotterdam is a part of a continent-wide military exercise. It has already handled military cargo, but even during the Cold War, it did not have any specifically dedicated facilities for such. Now, part of a container terminal is being converted to fix that problem.
Not every terminal is suitable for handling military cargo. If we had to transport large volumes of military goods, we would turn to Antwerp or other ports to take over some of the capacity, and vice versa. Bodwin Simons, CEO of the Port of Rotterdam Authority.
Well, be assured, Mother Russia is not sitting and waiting. She is running many preparatory campaigns for a potential invasion of NATO countries. For starters, Moscow is seeking to restore a spy network in the Czech Republic. The Czech Security and Information Service confirmed that. The head of the country's intelligence service, Mikhail Kudelka, said that Russia has noticeably stepped up hybrid operations in Europe: cyber attack, dissemination of fake news in large amounts, espionage, sabotage, you name it. Or let my colleague Kristina Dombrovska to keep you updated on the subject.
The head of Czech intelligence called 2024 one of the most dangerous years for the country's national security due to hybrid attacks by the Russian Federation. These include sabotage, attempts to evade sanctions, cyber attacks, and disinformation. The Czech intelligence report states that Russia often recruits migrants to carry out crimes. Social media is used to enlist potential agents. The report cites the example of a Belarusian citizen seeking asylum in Czechia, who was paid in cryptocurrency to post pro-Russian content online. Moscow aims to rebuild a broad agent network under the diplomatic cover of its embassy in Czechia, according to the report.
Such people were usually tasked with a wide range of activities, including transporting people or packages, photographing and filming sensitive objects, to arson attacks. Additionally, Czech intelligence highlights the role of the Russian Orthodox Church in Czechia. The agency asserts that this structure is fully loyal to the Kremlin and used as a channel of influence in Moscow's interests, from a publication by The Guardian.
Particular attention is paid to infrastructure linked to military aid for Ukraine. Since Russia's full-scale invasion, Prague has provided Kyiv with military assistance worth over $900 million.
The goal is to undermine the cohesion of Western societies, instill fear and uncertainty, reduce trust in the state's ability to ensure security, and increase pressure to cut support for Ukraine in its defense against Russian aggression, from a report by Security Information Service of Czechia.
In many cases, recruits are unaware they are acting in Russia's interests. Recruitment occurs through intermediaries, making it difficult to identify the orchestrator. As Czech President Petr Pavel noted, The exact number of Russian agents in the country remains unknown.
If you look at the resources and capabilities of Russian intelligence services, it's clear they are active in many areas. For example, companies engaged in Czech-Russian cultural cooperation, as well as under various other covers. So, it's very difficult to say how many Russians living in Czechia are actually working for Russian intelligence services. Obviously, our agencies are monitoring them. The Russian approach is as follows. If we cannot be stronger than our opponent, let's try to make them weaker. Through espionage, sabotage, subversive activities, cyber attacks, psychological campaigns, or disinformation, Petr Pavel, president of the Czech Republic, in an interview with BBC.
Over recent years, Czechia has repeatedly been targeted by Russian agents. In 2021, the country expelled 18 Russian diplomats after Kremlin intelligence services were proven to be involved in explosions at ammunition depots in 2014. Regarding recent sabotage acts, Czech intelligence mentions an attempted arson attack on a Prague bus depot in 2024. A Colombian citizen was sentenced to 8 years in prison for organizing the arson. Several similar sabotage attempts were thwarted. According to the Associated Press, citing European intelligence data, Russian special services have orchestrated over 70 hybrid warfare incidents in Europe since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. On July 8th, a British court convicted 3 individuals who, on orders from the Wagner Group, set fire to a warehouse containing aid for Ukraine.
On Tuesday, a British court found 3 men guilty of arson in the March 2024 plot that prosecutors said was masterminded by Russia's intelligence services, part of a campaign of disruption across Europe that Western officials blame on Moscow and its proxies. 2 other men, including Earl, previously pleaded guilty to organizing the arson, from a publication by Associated Press.
European intelligence officials warn that Russia's hybrid aggression in Europe is becoming increasingly dangerous. In 2024, 12 incidents of arson or serious sabotage were recorded, compared to 2 in 2023 and none in 2022. Reported by Kristina Dombrovska, UATV News.
As Ukrainian UAVs proved in Operation Spiderweb, Russian war machine is not invincible at all. This time, our UAVs paid a fiery visit to the military plants in the city of Tula. Drones also destroyed the Kronstadt UAV facility depot in Moscow region and attacked the aircraft company in the city of Taganrog, while targeting solely and exclusively military facilities. As you can see in the footage, there is no debris falling onto civilians. They even have fun to film Ukrainian UAVs from a safe distance, standing on their balconies. Suit yourself that either courageous or just stupid, that I don't know, but either way, you can clearly see the difference between how Russians wage wars and how Ukrainians defend themselves. We do damage and destroy, yes, but specifically Russian military facilities, not civilian areas, in retaliation of what they do to us every single night. Why? Well, because we are not them. As simple as that. And to add to the topic, the Ukrainian Defense Forces attacked the Krasnozavodsk chemical plant in the Moscow region. The General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces just confirmed. The plant produces explosives and ammunition, including thermobaric warheads for Shahed-type drones. Such strikes extremely painful for the military-industrial complex of the aggressor country, Russia, and undermine the combat capability of the Russian army. And also in terms of morale, also significant. It's Moscow region, right? So one more step closer to a red square, I guess. My colleague Nikita Skoblikov will update you on what actually happened.
The Russian dictator is trying to convince Russians that their makeshift developments supposedly surpass NATO weapons. He made this claim at another propaganda forum called Everything for Victory. The Moscow Times highlighted one such outstanding Russian innovation, makeshift metal structures known as mangals. These are mass installed on the aggressor army's equipment to provide some protection against Ukrainian drones. Initially simple grills, these mangals have evolved into solid screens and structures resembling sheds. Their effectiveness is demonstrated in videos from Ukrainian forces.
Putin is winning in his own mind and convincing Russians they surpass everyone. Russia, the great country of the future, produces the world's best planes, tanks, mines, and shells, but can't make a vacuum cleaner. That's another matter. Putin lies just as his predecessors did.
Despite the Kremlin's claims of a booming military industry, the reality on the front lines tells a different story. New equipment is increasingly rare, with most of what reaches the front being Soviet-era relics. Ukrainian defense forces' strikes on Russian military factories are causing significant damage, halting the production of components for equipment, artillery, and missiles. Acquiring these abroad to bypass sanctions is becoming harder and more expensive. As a result, Russia prioritizes quantity over quality.
It's about resuming production of the simplest weapons possible, which can be delivered to the battlefield quickly. The same goes for ammunition, which is why they rely on Iranians and North Koreans. Poor quality, but it shoots.
Due to issues in its military-industrial complex, Moscow is unable to fulfill even previously signed contracts. According to the Times of India, deliveries of S-400 air defense systems to India have been delayed by nearly 4 years. Under a $5.5 billion contract signed in 2018, India was to receive 5 S-400 squadrons by 2023, each with 2 batteries and 128 missiles of varying ranges. India has deployed 3 squadrons, but the remaining 2 are now expected by 2027, a clear sign of Russia's strained war machine, analysts say. Yet, even weakened, the aggressor's army remains a threat to Europe and NATO.
The West's main goal now should be a plan to reduce or destroy Russia's missile production capacity while increasing production of its own air defense and long-range systems. Russia produces more Iskanders, 700 per year according to Shure data, than the West produces ballistic missile interceptors. At least 2 to 3 Patriots are needed to intercept 1 Iskander. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the National Security and Defense Council's Center for Countering Disinformation, on Telegram.
NATO recognizes the Kremlin's threat and is actively reinforcing its eastern borders. As the Telegraph reports, alliance members acknowledge that deterring a potential Russian invasion requires measures previously considered unthinkable, including deploying millions of anti-personnel mines along borders. Consequently, the Baltic states, Poland, and Finland have announced their withdrawal from the Ottawa Convention banning anti-personnel mines.
Russia is a totalitarian state where one person gives an order and it's executed immediately. In Western countries, it's harder. The shift to a war footing will happen in the EU. It's inevitable because processes we couldn't imagine are already unfolding in Europe.
Ukraine has also announced its withdrawal from the Ottawa Convention. Fedir Venislavsky, a member of Ukraine's Parliamentary Committee on National Security, Defense, and Intelligence, stated that Ukrainian enterprises are preparing to launch production of anti-personnel mines. Reported by Nikita Skoblikov, UATV News.
Well, it is time to say our goodbyes. I guess my name is Henry Keane, and it was Wrap Up Weekly at UATV. We appreciate your time, your presence, and your voice in the comment sections below. It really helps the Ukrainian voice to be heard worldwide. So don't shy out to comment and subscribe. Join the fight for freedom and sovereignty on the right side of the history being made in front of your eyes. Stay tuned. Hope to see you next week, and goodbye.